Rants. Okay, welcome to another G4 Guitar Teacher TV chat. What we're going to do today is, we've got a few topics that we can talk about, but as always, what I'd like to do is just start with question time and see what questions you guys have got. The topics that I have are always going to be at the end, and if we start with the questions, that way we make sure that we're sort of tackling the most important issues for you guys. So does anyone have a question to start with?
I've got one. Yep.
Go, Trevor.
Okay, so I've just had an email tonight. There's a guy basically who said his son who's 10 and his daughter who's 12, they're both interested in playing guitar. They want more information about the 5-week intro course. So first of all, you know, thoughts about what about the possibility of grouping them together after the 5 weeks? Is that a good idea, putting siblings in the same group? You know, just basically how to sort of approach it, because I haven't responded to it yet. So any thoughts about that?
Generally the idea is in that first 5 weeks is to kind of assess where they're at. A 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, the age difference is not that much, so there's every chance that they'll work out quite well. But sometimes it can be a world apart. Sometimes, you know, the 12-year-old is, you know, moving into the kind of teenage mindset and too cool for school, or that sort of thing, where the 10-year-old is still, you know, daddy's little baby and still at home, and well, they're both at home, but still in that kind of young child mindset. So the brother may not want to be with his sister. You don't know. Maybe they get on really well and they'll make a good group. So I wouldn't call it either way. I would just do the assessment, and I'd kind of leave myself open too with the parents, and just say this exactly what I'm saying. Is that I wouldn't call it at this point. Let's just see what happens. But you can ask the father, you know, do you think that they would get along well in a group? Is it something that that you see that would work well? Sometimes for parents, they want the convenience of not having to come twice if you've got them in two separate groups. So they're thinking convenience. Sometimes you get the problem with siblings together where there is that sibling rivalry, and so what ends up happening is one learns faster than the other, and the other one feels I'm no good at this, because they're comparing themselves to the other sibling. So you've got to kind of be aware of that as well. But then there are cases where it works amazingly well. I've had quite a few examples of where you know, siblings were just really working together. I mean, my brother and I are a good example. We sort of learned together. My brother did singing more than guitar, but we played in bands and did all sorts of things. And we used to fight about other things, but when it came to music, we were, you know, as close as can be. It was actually probably the main thing that brought us together was our music. So.
Wondering if it might be a little bit exclusive having a sort of brother and sister in a group. If, you know, another student joins at a later date, is it going to be a bit, you know, kind of exclusive for them if there's a brother and a sister there who are, you know, already very close? I don't know how the dynamics of that will work out.
It's actually not a bad thing. I found my best groups were those groups where I had two people who already knew each other, because they already create this sense of kind of connection in the group. When you've got, let's say you bring 3 students together who don't know each other, it can be quite almost, they're all sort of quiet and sort of introverted. But when you've got 2 that are already talking, already feel relaxed because they've got a friend or a sibling there, then when the third one joins, it doesn't take long before they kind of get into the mode of it, because it's already this relaxed atmosphere. Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, I mean, you certainly can have situations where the third one might feel locked out, but it's rare, and you know, as the teacher, you can easily facilitate it by finding some common ground between them, and that's what I was always looking for. So one of the examples I used, and I've used it before, but it's one of those examples, and this will happen with your own teaching over the years. Certain things will really stick in your head, and this particular one stuck in my head. But it's where I had 2 girls who were friends, and another 2 girls who were friends. So I had these 4 girls in the same group, and because they were 2 pairs of friends, they already kind of felt comfortable. So when they came in the group, there was no problem in sort of getting them to, all four of them to get along. It actually was really good. But then I had this other girl who was, and these are all teenage girls from sort of 13 to 15. I had this other 15-year-old girl who was kind of gothic and quite serious, and just I was worried that she would fit in. I thought, it's kind of she kind of thinks that she's pretty cool and dark and all this sort of thing. But what I found out was that that particular girl, when I brought her into the group, even though in that first lesson she was quite held back and introverted, she was interested in the band at the time, My Chemical Romance, and I knew at least one of the other girls was. It turned out that a few of the girls were interested in the band, but there was one other girl who was crazy about the band as well. So it made it very easy when I brought them in to say, all right, who likes My Chemical Romance? And sort of, you know, these girls, yeah, exactly. So there's this connection straight away, and so the fifth girl came in and connected with that other girl who sort of connected her to her friend, and yeah. So it's really just about finding that common ground, and this is really, you know, sometimes it's more important to get your groups, you know, working together and getting along and enjoying each other's company than it is for the content that you're teaching in the group, because when they get along, they become motivated, and they become motivated around music. And I don't know if you experienced this, but I certainly did in my teenage years, that I connected to some guys, and even though we shared the same music teacher or guitar teacher, it wasn't the guitar teacher that was inspiring us so much, even though he was great, but it was the fact that we were hanging out, jamming, we were, you know, talking about the music we liked, you know, sharing records and all that sort of thing. But the teacher facilitated that, so the teacher really became the glue for us. And that's what you want to do, is you want to be the connector. And whenever you see successful businesses, the successful businesses are based on connecting people. And that's kind of what I'm doing with you guys, is trying to get you guys more connected as a network, because you're going to be a lot more motivated, you're going to learn a lot faster than if it's just me, you and me constantly. You know, if you come to me asking me questions and I sort of help you, you're only really getting my point of view, even though that's you know, hopefully it's a good point of view, and it's certainly based on experience. The kind of the feeling that you have, you're going to be able to relate more to these other guys in the network, because they've either just gone through it, what you're going through now, because you're fairly new, Trevor, or they're still going through what you're going through. So they're going to relate better to where you are, you know, up here and emotionally. And that's what you want to do with your students too, is bring them together and create the same dynamic.
So, I mean, as far as the initial sort of 5-week lessons are concerned, it would be a good idea, presumably, to book them in separately and not kind of have back-to-back lessons. Otherwise, you're going to have one sitting around watching the other one, kind of getting bored and so on. So it would be better to just have two lots of separate lessons and then maybe group them together at the end of it if it's a good idea. Is that sound like a sensible arrangement?
Yeah, that sounds good. Look, you can do them back-to-back as long as the one who's waiting is not interrupting the other one in any way. That there's that kind of you know, separation. This is your half an hour, now that's your half an hour. And look, you're going to be group teaching anyway, so you'll get pretty good at handling, you know, multiples. But yeah, it's just got to, they've just got to have that distinction between whose class it actually is at that half an hour. Look, I find that they don't get bored. What I find is that if one of them's there, I used to have a waiting room, so I would have them the other one in the waiting room doing the practice. Especially after that first lesson, if they just had the first lesson, if they haven't started yet, I would say, here's the folder, have a look, start reading through the materials. And I'll be with you in half an hour. Or you can sit in and watch, but you just need to be quiet. That's all while I teach your brother or sister. So, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. There's going to be, with a lot of these things, as much as we try and structure it and plan it, what we want to do is also be a little bit flexible. The beauty of structure in anything, if you think about a song, Right? One of the hardest ways to write a song is to start from nothing and just go, okay, I'm going to write a song. How am I going to write it? What kind of song am I going to write? What kind of, how do I want to sound? And it's a very difficult challenge. But if you take a song, and this is a common songwriting technique, is to take a song that's already been written and use that, the structure of that song, to write a new song. Go, okay, here is it. It's got, you know, an 8-bar intro. It's got, you know, 16-bar verse. It leads into a bridge, chorus. So I've got this structure. So now I'm going to write a song around this structure. That's a lot easier for writing a song, especially in a particular style, than it is to try and just start with nothing. And so it's the same with your teaching. We've got a structure. We've got a way of doing things. Work within that structure. But if you think of something different or something that can sort of add to it, try to stay within the structure, and then you'll find it's very effective, because the structure keeps it together, but it's, you know, based on a formula that we know works. But within the structure, you've got that ability to be flexible and to try different things.
Sort of like blues jamming.
Exactly. Look, you can't go wrong with 12-bar blues, right? You know, 12-bar blues works. It's been working for you know, 50, 60, 70 years. But to play the 12-bar blues exactly as it was, as somebody else wrote it, could be a bit boring, dull. And it's the same with your classes, even though we have that structure to your weekly groups. The structure itself works really well. But if you just ran the same lesson every week after week, your students get bored pretty quickly. Oh, not this again. But keeping it, you know, the 5, 10, 10, 5, that's your structure, and then playing within that. You know, I think of sport, you know, sports games. You watch a football game and it's the same, you know, 2 halves and a break in the middle. You know, there's certain rules that keep it all sort of structured, but yet every game is different. And that's what we're trying to achieve as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Does anyone else have a question? This is the time. Question time? No?
My wife started working for me. I was wondering if you had any suggestions for what I should do with her.
Okay, so you got a new employee, is that right?
Yeah, my wife.
Okay. Sorry, your wife, did you say?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's breaking up a bit, that's all for me. You might be a bit far from the microphone, that's all.
Yeah, let me get it closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're experimenting with different hours. She's like at my location trying to get more emails and walk-bys and stuff, and we're experimenting with the hours. And I've noticed, I think I've lost a couple students because they saw me teaching and they wanted to kind of enroll right then and there, and I couldn't really go into the sales process with them because I was teaching. And like I tried calling them back, and they weren't interested anymore. And I have a feeling if my wife was there and she had sold to them right then and there, I very well may have booked them in. I was just wondering if you had similar experiences.
Definitely. When it comes to the process of, it's a bit like meeting someone for the first time. If you don't make a connection that first time, if you try and follow up with that person, often you're still a stranger. You're still somebody that they're not that interested in talking to. So if you can make a strong connection initially, it's really important. But obviously, if you're teaching, I went through this situation early on when I had, you know, my kind of first shop, and people would walk in and I was sort of, well, I'm teaching a student, but hey, I don't want to miss out on this potential student, and it became very stressful. And it's not something that I recommend because it got busier and busier. I had more and more people walking in, more and more lessons getting interrupted, and I would say to the student, I'm really sorry, you know, and I was even trying to do all this stuff like, you know, give them a half an hour lesson, but allow an hour. So if I got interrupted, there was always time there. But then I realized, hey, you know, this is back in my 20s, but I realized, hey, I've got to hire somebody to do this job. And so that's when I hired my first teacher, and because I put myself in the sales role. And I actually had at one point somebody in sales, but that didn't work because they weren't really enrolling anybody, and it was because they weren't trained. So what you want to decide when you do this is what's the best role for you. Obviously, with your wife, you're got to be doing the teaching at this stage, so she can't do the teaching. So if
she has a background in sales.
Fantastic. Well, even better. And look, especially considering the audience that you're trying to approach, which are mothers, that female touch is just really adds to it. They just feel more comfortable that your wife is female, and they can relate to her. It's not that you can't do a great job as well, but it's just that little bit easier, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. If you can do it, if you can have it so that your wife is there primarily in the times when people are most likely to walk in, that's great. And if she's doing the selling as well, then you've also got that kind of double go at things. And this is something that Emma and I have done for years, where sometimes Emma doesn't make the connection, and then I do, and then vice versa. And we used to, because there were times when I had different schools and shops. For example, we had a school called BMP, was its name, the original one, with Emma, and we would have we had something like 450 students. We had 8 studios running, and then on any given day there would be at least 3-4 people walking in and inquire about lessons. And so Emma and I were there at the same time, and often there was a sort of back and forth where Emma would sort of jump in or I'd jump in, and we just knew we knew when it was better for Emma to handle or better for me to handle. If you can set up that dynamic with your wife, you will enroll probably 99% of people who inquire.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a good way to go. Brilliant. Okay, cool. Any questions, guys? Any other questions? No, all good. Okay. What we well, I was speaking to Ben just before you guys joined, just before this started, and we're talking about trying to think, instead of what we're usually talking about, the teacher perspective, is try and turn this around into the student perspective. And that's something that can be missed, where we're constantly thinking about, am I selling right? Am I this? Am I that? Is this what I should be teaching? Is this not what I should be teaching? And we're really thinking about our own perspective, how our students or how our audience sees it from their point of view, is something that we really need to look at and get into their shoes. So what I want to do is I'm going to go around the group here and just sort of ask you from a student perspective, and I want you to go back to when you first started learning guitar and your own experiences, whether you had a teacher or not, just how you perceive things and what kind of things that you would have been looking for as a student, and what kind of things that you feel may have put you off learning guitar. And we want to sort of dig into it and see how we handle each of those situations. So I'll just start with Adam. I'll go from left to right on my screen anyway. So Adam, first of all, when did you first have lessons?
My first official lessons were when I first went to college.
Okay, great. All right.
For the guitar, I studied saxophone with a teacher, but for the guitar, it was college.
Okay. And it doesn't really matter from the perspective of whether it's sax or guitar, so either one is cool.
Okay, so when I first had lessons, private lessons would have been when I was in elementary school on the saxophone.
Okay, good. So what we'll do is we'll take one good point and one bad point from that experience. What was something in that experience that was good, that you felt the teacher delivered to you in a great way, that you would want to build into your own teaching?
No, he was great. I don't know if you played the saxophone at all, but I wasn't tonguing the instrument correctly. I was just blowing into it, and he immediately corrected that. I got way better with him. So I actually didn't have any negative experience with him at all. The only negative thing was my mom stopped it too soon, so I couldn't keep going. Okay,
cool. All right, good. So he obviously helped you with your technique. So this is good. If it's all good, that's great. Let's just stick with that. So what do you feel made it good apart from the technique? Was there was there something else that you
Oh,
can add to that?
he was really passionate about it. I could tell, and I remember like the lesson was supposed to be over, and he's like, no, please, can we keep going? Because he wanted to, because we were onto something, and he was just very passionate about it. I remember that being really, really good.
Okay,
I can remember that back in elementary school. I can still remember that.
Yeah. So he obviously played a big role in inspiring you because the passion.
Yeah.
And we have spoken about this. Yeah, the passion is just, I don't know. To me, it's the 80-20. 80% passion, 20% content of what you teach. Even more so. A teacher who knows everything is really, it has all the content, a great system of teaching, blah 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 blah. Yet has very little passion, is not going to cut it for most students. And that's really important. Yeah, the passion. Okay, great. So we'll take that away from that. Okay, moving on to Alex. Alex, let's go back to your first experience as a student.
Yeah. So I remember my first teacher. He was a classical guitar teacher, and I took lessons. I think it was first privately, and then grouped with my friend Benoit. And I remember him being. I don't know. The first year, I remember doing a lot of practice and like really getting into it. And he taught me. We did all sorts of classical pieces, like I can't remember the exact something in Spanish. But yeah, no, they were really good, and eventually we got on to playing that acoustic piece, "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You" by Led Zeppelin, which is something I still play. So I don't. He sort of really he really inspired me somehow, which is strange because it was classical guitar, which I now have very little interest in. But yeah, I mean, he initially sort of stoked that fire for guitar, so that was really good.
Okay. So what was do you say was good about him as a teacher? What was he doing well?
Fantastic technician. He's a very, very, very skilled classical guitarist. And yeah, I guess he sort of inspired me more than anything. He was just like he seemed to know what he was doing, and he took us through a very specific method. It was the I forget exactly what it was, but it was like the it was one of the Mel Bay books on classical guitar, and gave us a book of pop songs as well, which we could go through because he knew we wanted to do that sort of stuff as well. Yeah, I think it was mainly the inspiration. It was just
okay,
yeah.
cool. So he was sounds like he was practicing what he preached. So he was obviously a very good player.
Very much.
Yeah, and that in itself is inspiring, and I think that's important for us as teachers, is to make sure that we are constantly developing our own playing, and to be inspiring our students through our playing. And this is something that some teachers miss, and I know that I've seen witness teachers, and I've been to teachers like this where they rarely actually play much. I'm not talking about going to the other kind of extreme of overplaying, where you're constantly, showing off in your lessons. But you need to play a certain amount, and you need to do things that are kind of well timed, and will impress your students. So, for example, understanding what your students like, and that's where the ultimate song list. The whole reason for the ultimate song list is not necessarily to teach those songs to your student, but to know what songs are important to your student. So if you can learn a little bit out of those songs, just learn bits and pieces, then you can inject those into your lessons as examples. And they're the kind of things that will inspire your students. There's nothing better for a student. And I think back to my sort of early lessons, seeing my teacher play a song that I knew, that was impressive for me. The teacher could have played some song that was 10 times more difficult, and then I would have gone, okay, well that's pretty clever, but I don't know the song, doesn't mean anything to me. But to see them play the songs of my heroes, that was like, wow, amazing. So knowing what to play, playing the right things, is important. So I'll take from that inspiration. So from the negative side of it, it doesn't even have to be this teacher. Let's just say, is there an experience with a teacher, any teacher, not even necessarily a music teacher, that you can think of, Alex, of something that you wouldn't want in your lesson, something that you thought, well, that didn't really feel good to me?
Yeah, a couple of teachers I've had I mean, this is just a minor thing, but just taking phone calls in the lesson, I've found that's pretty, like, it's just like, well, kind of, I'm here for your time, so that's just a basic unprofessional. But yeah, another thing maybe with another guitar teacher would be just not really hammering the practice. Like every week he'd be like, "Oh, you haven't done your practice. You've got to do your practice." When it was just kind of like I left feeling kind of guilty because I hadn't done it, but I still didn't go back and do it next week for whatever reason. Like I probably wanted to do it, but like for whatever reason he just didn't put the fear of God into me or something, and I just didn't end up doing that much practice.
Yeah, perhaps there was a kind of, I know what you mean. I mean, with the first one about the interruptions, I think that's really important, is that, to me, teaching is like a performance, and you don't want to go to, say, a concert and the performer be in the middle of a song and then the phone rings and they say, anybody's phone ring for that matter. It's you don't want that interruption. And so I went to a chiropractor, and apparently a very good chiropractor, but that's what he was doing. Every 5 minutes the phone would ring and he'd say, "Oh, I'll just be back in a minute." And I've been to massages where that happened. They're saying, "Oh, they're kind of running the front of the office as well," and so it's not working for me. And it's not that you're not good; it's just the interruptions. So so that's a huge one. So, and with the practice, which I think is a big one, it's just that sincerity of knowing that the teacher really wants you to succeed. And when they're not really taking your lack of practice seriously, then they're not really taking the lessons seriously, what they're doing, because they don't see a connection between your progress and their reputation. That's the problem. And you can sense that as a student, and I hope you guys can sense it with me, is that your progress is really important to me, that you're actually moving forward with your businesses. If you're not, then that affects me and my reputation. And that's where, if I see a teacher not performing or underperforming, that's when I'll want to know why. Let's talk about it. What's going on? So yeah, I get that. Great. All right. So Ben, your good experience. This is Ben in the UK, not Ben in Australia.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little hard because I started when I was 6, so very early memories. But I think now you've made me think of it. Probably just that it was so safe that I never felt that I couldn't make mistakes. I never felt judged. Obviously, you are being judged, but I felt like he'll tell me what I need to work on rather than he'll tell me what I did wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just the right attitude that meant that I felt comfortable.
Okay, great. So you weren't feeling vulnerable. They made you feel safe is probably a great term to use.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, because I think when you're, especially with people who are got a lot of kids, it can be adults as well. Some adults are very sensitive about whether or not they're going to be any good, and because we think sometimes, and I don't know why, again it's probably an evolutionary thing, but we think that talent and our ability to do something is connected to whether we're a good or bad person, and so people are very afraid to speak in public, to get up on a stage and talk in front of especially their peers, because they're afraid if they don't do well, then they're going to be looked down upon, and everyone's going to say, you're no good, you're stupid, you're this, you're that, just because you weren't very good at that particular thing, or that particular skill, or you don't have enough experience in that yet. So this is where I think it's easy for us to forget. I think, and I've seen it, where teachers there was a particular teacher that worked for me some years ago, and he was actually very experienced guitar player and a very nice guy. But I started hearing these rants in his teaching room because he would go in there and he'd close the door, and I'd hear this, and I thought, that's a bit concerning. And anyway, I said to him, look, do you mind if I leave the door open just because I want to just be able to hear what's going on? And he wasn't too happy about that, but I just said that I just need to be aware of what's going on in the rooms because obviously I'm looking after the kids here, etc., etc. And what he was he's getting really frustrated with his students. Not like that, like this. I told you, how many times do I have to tell you? And I was like, whoa, you can't do that. You can't be berating your students. They're learning. They don't know how to do it yet. They're trying to. And even if they know what to do, and we all know this, you may know what to do, but your fingers just aren't doing it yet. It hasn't locked in yet. So this is something. But this particular teacher, and a nice guy, but he ended up resigning not long after that. And he just didn't have the patience for teaching. It just frustrated him that these students couldn't just get it straight away. So I think it's really important to understand that perspective of your student who is trying to do what you're asking them to do. And I'm not talking about the student who doesn't practice or is lazy or not trying. And again, we still don't berate those particular students. We show some concern, but we don't berate them. But it's that making the student feel comfortable, making them feel that making mistakes is okay. And what I did is that very early on I learned this, where I never said to a student, no, that's wrong. And what I did say is I would just say, try again. Well done, try again. Try again. So my approach was not that you failed. It was just that we got to keep trying until we get it. Try again, try again, try again. So just think about it and even record some of your lessons, because you're sometimes not aware of these little subtle things that you do, where you put in kind of little negatives, and they're things that creep up maybe from your own experiences, your own childhood, where you're a little bit frustrated with the students, or you're feeling kind of like they're not trying hard enough. So if you can change your language and change it so that it encourages them, it's persistent, it's pushing them, but it's encouraging in a positive way. Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. So what about a negative experience for you, Ben? Something, it doesn't have to be necessary to do with your guitar teaching. Ben Alkidi? Oh.
Sorry, David, I heard my name, but I didn't hear anything else, really. I'm getting a lot of just...
Oh, it's cutting out on you, is it?
Yeah.
Just talking about a negative experience, something that a teacher has done with you that you would not want to do with your students, something that you've learned from their mistake, let's say.
I don't know. I think mostly just not putting enough into the lesson. Like sometimes it's mostly because he was so good most of the time that I noticed it. So it's not. I feel kind of mean calling him it now, but none of you know who he is, so that's fine. It's just that maybe 3 out of 100 lessons, I really noticed a lack of energy, and he was just not there. And I didn't know him too well at the time. I was only 8 or 9, so I wasn't saying, "What's going on?" I just went, "Oh, that wasn't." That's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, having the enthusiasm every time, or at least being consistent. Because if he hadn't had the enthusiasm, maybe I wouldn't have noticed. But when it drops, you're really like, "Oh, what happened there?"
Brilliant. Consistency. That's what I'm going to take from that. Is there's a lack of consistency, and I think that's again an area that there's no point in putting on. It's like a band. You don't want to go and see a band that's great one time and then the next time they're terrible. That inconsistency. It's better that they're sort of somewhere in the middle all the time, and that's with your teaching, aim for that consistency. Okay, Ben Gunn, what is, if you go back to your early beginnings. Did you learn? How old were you when you started learning guitar?
I was about 12, and I was actually naturally left-handed. I had to teach myself right-handed as well. Yeah, that was because there was no left-handed guitars around, so I had to readjust. Or I naturally was picking up left-handed, but then you had to change around. But I didn't get. I sort of learned off mates and that for a few years, and then I got lessons for 12 months off a guy. I don't know, the older guy, so probably in his 50s, and he taught me more sort of style, and what I liked about what he did, he was sort of performing as we've been talking about. He'd sing, one of the first songs he taught me was Mr. Bojangles, and that really inspired me, I guess, in that way, because I could. And things I remember about him was, sound of his acoustic guitar as well. It sounded beautiful, old acoustic guitar, and I never forget the calluses on his fingers. He just had the flattest fingers you've ever seen, So that was yeah. But so that was only for about 12 months. I guess I've been thinking about the only real negative thing was I guess the age barrier, and all my mates were learning Unskinny Bop, but and Poison and Guns N' Roses and all that sort of thing, and here I am learning some country blues and all that sort of stuff. But it didn't really bother me too much. And, it's funny that I actually asked all my students this week what they enjoy most about learning the guitar. And pretty much all of them said the songs. I enjoy playing the songs, all the kids and that. So it's interesting talking about it.
Yeah, it's and look, this is where the misconception comes in sometimes with G4, is that we know the biggest driver of what the students want to do, play the songs. It's what drives us. We want to play songs as well. Nobody picks up a musical instrument to say, hey, I want to be the greatest scale player or arpeggio player. But because of that, if we look at the 80-20, learning the skills and developing and practicing the skills gives you the tools. It's like keeping your tools, if you're a carpenter, keeping your tools sharp. So that when it comes to your chisels and your saws and everything, when it comes to actually building the houses, that your tools are sharp as, and makes it very easy for you to do. So that's what we're doing, is we're saying, yes, we know you want to play the songs, and so we're going to sort of keep that top of mind. That's what the Ultimate Song List is about, and by sort of throwing bits and pieces, as you were saying, they've been seeing your teacher perform, that kept you inspired, because if he's playing the songs that you like or that are impressive for you, then that keeps you excited and coming back week after week. And so that we want to remember that our lessons are partly a performance, so we're sort of weaving that into the lesson, but what we're really doing is sharpening their skills, and by keeping those skills sharp, when they come to learn a song, they'll be pleasantly surprised how easily they learn a particular song, rather than going from the other point of view of having very blunt tools and them saying, I want to build a house, and then trying to chisel with the blunt chisel, or use a blunt saw, and struggling. What they do is they get through the first part of that song and they give up because it's too hard. So they don't have the skills, the tools, if you like, to be able to do it easily. So by having that kind of reverse take, and this is where the 80-20 comes in, and that gives them that ability to not feel frustrated, to keep the songs alive and keep that front of mind or top of mind by you playing parts of those songs and demonstrating and executing them. That will keep your students motivated. So we come back to where we're primarily focused on keeping the student excited, motivated, but keeping them on the tasks that matter most. So if we think of picking, developing that picking and having a great picking skill will allow them to learn lots of different things and learn songs very easily. Whereas we've all seen it. We've all seen that, students with very poor picking technique, and they can play whole songs from start to finish. I had one student I remember who could play Metallica solos from start to finish, but his picking and technique was woeful. So they sounded terrible, even though he knew all the notes exactly as they were that they're written. He didn't have the dexterity to execute them very well. So, Trevor. Now, Trevor, this is so. Can you tell us, Trevor, when you first started learning guitar?
My sort of first recollection of it would be sort of like formal lessons was probably, I'd say about 10, 15 years ago. And I went to a teacher who was very good on theory. He kind of gave me a lot of stuff on this sort of circle of fifths and, sort of how to write songs, as in what chords you could use if you were writing in a particular key, that sort of thing. Gave me a lot of sort of good theory background, which is stuff I still remember that's useful. Where I didn't feel he was quite so positive, he was kind of teaching in an apartment, and it was kind of pretty disgusting. He had kind of old pizza cartons sort of piled up all over the place, and I know people who actually had lessons with him and just didn't go back again because they were just so put off by the kind of environment that they were sitting in. And then as the lessons went on, I kind of felt he was kind of just getting lazier, in that he was just giving me sort of homework of, okay, I want you to write a song, and then he'd just spend the whole lesson kind of critiquing my song. And, I kind of think, well, I don't really care what you think of the song, it's like I'm wanting to learn guitar, if you don't like what I've written, then, sort of screw you sort of thing, I'm coming to you to learn to play the guitar. And in the end, I just kind of thought, this isn't really going anywhere, so I just stopped having the lessons with him. So, it kind of started out well and sort of trailed off really with him.
Which is interesting, because as a teacher, perhaps he's good for students for a short period of time. Perhaps he would be good working in a school where the environment is not set by him. He needs somebody to sort of, regulate him, if you like.
I got the impression that he was just getting, as he got more students, he was kind of spreading himself a bit thin, and the kind of quality was tailing off maybe. That was an impression I had, anyway.
Yeah. And it was probably a case of, see, most people who get into guitar teaching get into it with the idea of creating a job for themselves. They don't have a business plan, they don't have a long-term plan, which is what I want to touch on here for kind of the rest of this session now, is to talk about how we get caught up in these very short-term thinking kind of business ideas and plans. And when you think more long-term, it's not only good for your business, but it's actually good for you emotionally. It reduces stress. Psychologically, you will be in a much better place if you think of your business in long-term. The idea is to act in the moment, but think from kind of zoom out and think from a broader perspective. And I was watching one of those rare interviews just recently with Brennan Page from Google, and it was really interesting because Page was talking about how he felt the biggest problem with businesses today, and in most businesses, is this kind of CEO turnover, of where most CEOs come in and they do the average stint of a CEO in a big company these days is about 4 years, which he says is the same in politics. Most leaders of governments are in for about 4 years, and then they switch over to a new leader. So there's no long-term projection, no long-term plan. And as he was saying, he said that when we started Google and we were sort of building the platform of the search, we were always thinking 10, 20 years away. Where are we going to be in 10, 20 years? Now, Google right now, just to sort of bring you up to date on what they're doing, is they've just gone around and they've bought something like 80 or 90% of the robotics companies around the world. They've just gone on this big spending spree and buying up all these companies. A thing called DeepMind, which is all about AI. They've taken on Ray Kurzweil as their head engineer, who's perhaps the leading futurist, and many say an absolute genius. He seems like a pretty smart guy to me. They've bought Boston, what's it called? Boston, I've just forgotten, but they're basically they're one of those one of the leading companies in robotics, and they've just gone and bought a whole bunch of other companies, smaller ones as well. And what they really do, they've got this project which they're going to develop. You've got Page, who's looking after Google, who's now the CEO of Google, and then you've got Brin, who's really got what they're calling Google X, which is all about developing these new technologies to bring AI into the equation. So just to give you a quick idea, the new Google search, which they're working on, which probably be 5 years away yet, but it's going to be like an assistant to you. So instead of you going and saying, what's the capital of, whatever, Ukraine, to pick an example, and it gives you an answer, what it's going to do is think more deeply about what you're asking. So it will be like having an assistant who knows you and learns. So in other words, the more that you sort of work with this search, the more it gets to know you and what your preferences are and what you're thinking even before you're thinking it. And this is what Ray Kurzweil is developing. He believes it's going to be the new search. Now, without this long-term thinking, these projects wouldn't happen within a company like Google. So if they were thinking about their quarterly, which is what most companies do, think about their quarterly profits, if they were thinking about that, then what would happen is that they would look at selling as much advertising as they could. Now they'd do promotions, they'd run an ad campaign, whatever they did, to sell more of whatever they've got. And so this short-term thinking cripples most companies, and it paralyzes them. And the same occurs with you guys in your teaching, is that you can look at, and where we do have short-term goals, and it's really important to have that, and it's important to have budgets and know what you're aiming for, otherwise you're out of the game before you even start. But what you want to be doing is thinking where you're going to be in 5 years or even 10 years, rather than where you're going to be tomorrow or next week or next month. So you might be looking, and I had this discussion recently with one G4 teacher, where he was concerned because he was only just paying his bills. He's got about 20 students. He's been with G4 for about 6 months, and he was worried because he signed up. I think he had something like 50 inquiries, and a lot of those didn't enroll. Quite a few of the ones that he did enroll ended up not going past the intro or dropping out. But he's sitting on 20 students now, and he's looking at 6 months. 6 months now, I've got 20 students. I'm really worried because the 20 students is only enough to pay for my rent and a bit of food, but I've got nothing left over. In fact, if I keep going, I'm going to be behind. But when I took the long-term perspective with him and said, okay, well, 6 months ago you had no students for a start. You're off doing something else to bring in the money, but what you've done is you've reduced that other income to focus on what's doing here. So you've gone from 0 to 20 in 6 months. Now the first 6 months are harder than the second 6 months, because the first 6 months you don't have any experience, you haven't laid out any marketing, nobody knows about you, there's no referrals, so all these things that are not in place, and you spend the first 6 months building that infrastructure. So if in the first 6 months you've ended up with 20 students, guess what? In the next 6 months, you're probably going to enroll another 40 students. So you're probably going to have about 60 students in the first 12 months. And then in the next 6 months, up to 18 months, it's going to get even better, because the marketing that you've done previously it's still going. That's the thing with marketing, is it's ongoing. In Australia, when I was a kid, there was a big campaign that they ran to get kids and to eat Vegemite. I don't know if any of you guys in the UK, do you guys in the UK know Vegemite? Just put up your hand if yes. You've heard of Vegemite? Yes? Okay, good. All right, so in back when I was a kid, Vegemite was popular, but there was a lot of advertising behind it. It was all about Vegemite kids. You know, you see these kids with bread and Vegemite on their faces, and so it was happy kids are Vegemite kids. And you know, it's really fairly disgusting stuff, and it's just very high in sodium. They were even talking about banning it at one point because the salt content is so high. It's you know, if you eat too much of it, it's poison, and so it's not something that you really should be giving to your kids, especially not in any large doses. So but they ran this amazing campaign, and you don't see Vegemite ads today on TV. They just don't exist. They haven't been on TV for years. In fact, any of you guys who are in your 20s may have never even seen a Vegemite ad on TV. But yet their branding and marketing campaign from that period back in the 70s is still running today. And that's where you need to really understand your marketing and the G4 marketing, us as a group, is that marketing is going to last for years and years and years and carry on into the future. So this is where, when we look in that short-term perspective, you can be in business for 6 months or a year and, you know, only have a handful of students, even have 20 students, let's say, after your first year, and you can feel frustrated and feel like you're not growing fast enough and you're trying to pay your bills. But that is the short-term perspective that really kills. So the thing that I want you to think about is, or the exercise that I'd like you to do is to draw out a 5-year plan and then even a 10-year plan of where your business will be, based on the idea that you're going to get better and better and better at what you do, and you're also going to be able to build on the marketing that you've already done. So people in your area will have seen the previous marketing. Now, I started a business from nothing. It was originally called BMP Music, and that came, there's a guy who was a student of mine. I started teaching at home, and then I went to some office space there, and I had this guy who came to me as a student, and his name was Brad, and he was a complete beginner guitarist, and he learnt with me for about 6 to 8 months, and he practiced really hard, and great guy. And anyway, I then sold that first business that I had, and I went overseas for a year. I went to the US, and this is in my 20s, and then I came back, and he rang me immediately and said, hey, how about we start a business together? And I said, what do you want to do? And he said, guitar school, of course. Okay, cool, that's what I was going to do anyway. So he put up some money, I put up some money, and we you know, we're not talking a lot of money here, just a little bit of money, and we started this little shop, and became Brad's Music Planet. But we're going to call it the Music Planet, but we couldn't call it the Music Planet because it already was a Music Planet, so we had to call it Brad's Music Planet to register it. Then we changed it to BMP because Brad, I bought him out after 12 months because he didn't want to go on with it. So then what happened is that became we moved location, and we changed it to Learn to Play Music. We had a name change. Anyway, that's about the time that Emma came into it. Now that business, I ended up selling that business as well to my brother, and that business now is probably the biggest, if not one of the biggest, suburban music schools in Australia. And the idea there is that I actually didn't see that coming. When I started that, I didn't have that 5-10 year plan, and it was quite stressful for me. There were a lot of ups and downs. There were a lot of emotional kind of you know, upheavals, if you like. It was very difficult for me to go through that experience with this constant roller coaster. But all the while, that business was growing and growing and growing and growing. And now they have something like 40 teachers, I think. They teach all kinds of instruments. You know, it's owned by somebody else now. My brother sold it on as well. But the reputation of that business now is that in the Sutherland Shire, it's kind of one of the main places, or the main place in the Shire to go and learn to play music. So this is what happens when if you think 5 years, 10 years down the track, you will have a much better perspective of where you can take things. And there's a saying that says that we overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year and underestimate what we can achieve in 5 years. And if you even look at technology, You look at things like, let's take the internet, for example. Who can tell me when the internet first came online? Anybody know?
78?
Not the internet, maybe the early kind of... The internet officially came online in 1993, okay? And for someone my age, late 40s, 93 doesn't seem that long ago. In 1993, when the internet first came online, you know, there was kind of all these visions of what it could and couldn't do. And after a year, 93 to 94, it looked like nothing much had happened. It looked like it still was puttering along. I think in 93, when it first came online, you know, the number of users was in the thousands. And then by 94, it was in the millions. But it still looked like, you know, to use the internet, there was no... You got to remember, there was no real search engines. There were search engines coming online, Alta Vista, and there's about 11 or 12 different search engines coming on, but they were hopeless. They didn't do anything, and they were just trying to... Already in that early stage, they were trying to sell ads on their websites. But I think at that point, you know, this is the kind of the almost the paradox, I guess. But there was that, you know, from the first year to the second year, it seemed like nothing had really improved. Yet people had sort of talked up the internet as being this huge revolutionary thing that was going to change the world, but the world hadn't changed in that first year. But then when you fast forward 10 years later to 2003, that's when Google had dominated. Google had gone from nothing, a nobody, to being the richest company in the world in 10 years. So can you imagine being where you are now, and in 10 years from now being the biggest, richest company in the world? Okay, that's what they did, which is quite unbelievable. You know, when you look at history, very few companies have ever done that, if any, have done that in 10 years. But that's taking the more long-term perspective. Had they not taken that long-term perspective, where all the other search engines were taking a short-term perspective, Google were taking the long-term. Right? And that's where, if you want to do well in business, and you want to do it in a way where, if you look at these guys, I don't know if you've seen them, but if you look at Paige and Bryn, they both look like a couple of guys that are half stoned. They don't look like they're kind of pumped, serious, you know, hard-working guys. They look, yeah, man, yeah, we're just cruising along, you know. They're so relaxed. It's incredible. But that's because they're not thinking about, hey, did we make our quarter profits this month? They don't care. They don't care whether they made their quarter profits or not. They've got someone else worrying about that. Somebody else worries about the money. What they're thinking about is where they're going to be in 10 years' time. And so that, what it does for you more than anything is it will retain your health. And I'm talking from experience here of many stressful periods that I went through of trying to make budgets and worrying about whether we had enough students and et cetera, et cetera. But if you take a more relaxed long-term approach and you think, well, it's going to be cool, everything will be fine. In 5 years from now, I'll have, you know, 5 schools, I'll have, you know, 1,000 students, you know, and that way when you're doing things like hiring teachers, or you're training people, or you're not taking on certain students because they're not quite right, or you find yourself in situations where you want to compromise, where you think, you know, I'll let this student pay cash. You're going to stop doing those kind of things because you're thinking it's a long-term perspective. I don't really care, you know, about the short term. I don't need your cash right now. I'm thinking about the system that I'm putting in place, and that everyone goes on to PayPal. And if you don't want to do the PayPal, that's okay. I understand it. That's cool. There's a teacher down the road who takes cash. I'm not that teacher. So this is the kind of thing. So does anyone, just kind of a question, does anyone have any kind of experience in worrying about the short term? Do you have any questions where taking this long-term perspective is a problem? Any comments at all?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just like you said, making budget is a really key thing sometimes. And I've actually just now, since I've sort of, I guess you'd say downside, but like James has basically gone overseas, so he's sort of not around anymore, and I've kind of reduced my other teacher Jackson's shifts from a Sunday to taking over James's shift and putting all his Sunday students there. So it's sort of like minimizing, and it's like if you sort of it's like you say, if you sort of look at it and go like, okay, this is what's happening now. Like, where would I like to see this go, assuming that there's nothing I can do absolutely right now this second? It is, yeah, it's as soon as you just step back and go like, okay, right now I'm eating chicken soup for the rest of the week. That's cool. In 6 months, where would I like to see, I mean, like, yeah, just down the road, how would I like to see this pan out? It really does impact your consciousness and just how you view the whole thing. And it's like a better example is the fact that I've got 75 students now, and say I look at Joachim's store. He's probably doing the best out of all of us right now. He's got maybe 120, 130 students, and he's just had that store longer. He's had it for a longer period of time. There's no way I can get up to that point straight away because I haven't had this shop for that long. So it's just taking that longer perspective.
Yeah. It's when you start to look at it, you've got to see where you're going. You do need to obviously stay on track. There is a balance here of making sure that you're paying your bills, making sure that you're actually building a profitable business, and this is where, if you look at, example, you've got James who's leaving, and that's sort of, you're thinking, if you've been kind of depending on James for your business to work, and now James is pulling out, this is actually really good for you because you now understand that you can't depend on him for your business to be profitable. It doesn't mean that you don't build up a team of people who you work with and rely on, but it would be like me depending on one member of G4 to provide income for me or to make G4 work or profitable. It doesn't depend on any of you guys as an individual. It depends on you as a whole, but not as an individual. If one of you leaves, that's cool, no problem. There's more coming, and the vision keeps growing. And so, when you look at a typical business that's successful, what happens is it goes up, down, flat, down, up, flat, up, down. This is how it goes. It doesn't go just like this. But when you look at it over time, taking out all the ups and downs, then it does look like that. You've got this kind of constant growth. And one of the books that describes this really well is Great by Choice. And Great by Choice was done by Collins and his partner, who are at Stanford, business professors. And these guys have put a lot of time in. This is based on a 30-year study of where they looked at businesses in the same sector. They took 20 businesses, and they took 10 sectors, and basically 2 businesses in each sector, and they took what they call an average company in that sector, a typical company, and then they compared it with what they call a 10x company. And the idea of the 10x company is that it's called 10x because its share price was 10 times that of the average company in that the kind of industry average. So what they looked at was, why did these companies, what kind of things were they doing and thinking about and acting that allowed them to constantly grow and be 10 times everybody else in the industry? And they looked at, like, one example, airlines. The airline was the biggest extreme. It wasn't 10 times, it was something like 30 or 40 times the industry average. And that was Southwest Airlines in the US. And Southwest were the only airline who, basically after 2000 or the 9/11 incident, every airline in the US and even many in the world failed to make a profit that year, the following year in 2002. Only Southwest was the only airline that made a profit. And the reason is that the way the airline was structured and the way their business was structured was resilient to problems. They'd spent years building it up in the right way, so they avoided these kind of economic, emotional ups and downs. And you can look at other companies like Coke, for instance. Coke, McDonald's. These companies don't experience these ups and downs. They consistently grow, and whether you like or agree with their products is irrelevant. It's the business structure and their long-term vision that they have that keeps them constantly growing. So the key here, and the point that I'm making, is that what they did is they focused on the way their business worked, not whether or not they made their financial quarters. That's not what they were looking at. They were looking at the structure of their business. And so when you're looking at your business, you've got to envision it when it's at a mature stage. Is it going to work? Because whatever you're putting into place, whatever foundations you're putting into place, is that going to work when you've got 100 students, when you've got 500 students, when you've got 1,000 students? Is your business going to still work? If it's not, then you're not putting the right foundations into place for growth. And so the way to think about that is to think about it long term. Another perspective is that we can look at it from a health perspective. What you do today, is that going to make you a health? What kind of person is that going to make you in 5 years? Are you going to be unhealthy? Are you going to have diabetes? Are you going to be overweight? Are you going to be, sick? What are your habits that you're doing today? How are they going to affect you in 5 and 10 years from now? And it's the same with you in your business. What structures are you putting into place now, today, and how will that affect you? Taking cash instead of setting up someone on a PayPal subscription is going to cause you a lot more work in the future. You're going to have a lot more problems. So having PayPal, I use the example because it's the most obvious, but other things like the practice log, and that's where I brought the practice log into play, was, okay, in 5 years when I've got hundreds of students, how is it going to look? How am I going to know where the students are practicing? How am I going to monitor it? How am I going to ensure that they know the practice is important? The practice log was the solution. So am I going to compromise on that? No, because I know it's important. And so I'm looking to the future of what students will be doing. The same with the checklists. How am I going to monitor students' progress? How am I going to? There was no where the teachers, teachers out there all the time are touting this idea of personalizing the lessons and teaching students what they want, and you see it everywhere. It's rampant, where they say, we teach you what you want, exactly what you want to learn. Well, that's a great idea, and students, it's a great marketing ploy, because it gets students going, oh great, I get to learn exactly what I want to learn. That's what I want. But it doesn't, when you're talking from a business point of view, it doesn't work. There's no way to scale that, because what you're saying is that we will assign an individual teacher to your individual needs, and so for the price that you're paying, unless you're going to charge them $100 a lesson, for the price that you're charging and the service you're offering, there's no profit in it. There's just no profit. So it's a really bad model, and it's because they're not thinking about it long term. What they're thinking about is short term. How do I get students today? Not about how is my business going to work in 5 or 10 years. And that's the biggest mistake that is made by guitar teachers everywhere. It's the biggest mistake made by music schools everywhere. And this is the difference, and I really hope you guys are getting this, is that although there are some short-term compromises here, and we're not saying, hey, we're going to give you everything that you want to make you happy today, we're not saying that. What we're saying is that we've got a program that will work for you and will work for us. And that's really important, because if it doesn't work for the business owner, you're going to be out of business. That's the bottom line. So there's no point in having this great business idea or offering these great offerings if you're not going to be in business in 5 years' time. You've got to be able to have something that will continue to thrive into the future. And that's really what this is about. And that's kind of the whole G4 premise, is that we've got a system of learning guitar that absolutely works, but it also works for us. It works for you guys as business owners, as entrepreneurs, that you can grow your business, a business model that you can grow your business on. So even though, see, the thing about in business and in most areas of life, the people who stand out, who succeed, are the ones who are doing, they're the 1%ers. They're the ones who are not doing what the other 99% are doing, and they're the ones who are doing what the other 99% are afraid to do. And in our business, the 99% are afraid to teach something that may not necessarily be what students want. So they're afraid to offer anything other than exactly what the student's asking for. So they believe, 99% believe, when the student wants to learn guitar, the first question you should ask, what do you want to learn? And I'm not saying that's a bad question, but it's whether or not you're asking that question to say, well, now I'm going to tailor your lessons exactly to what you want to learn, or I'm going to use that information to understand how to motivate you to learn the things that I know you need to learn to work to our program. Does that make sense? Everyone kind of get that? I know you do because you're here. But if anyone want to make a comment, questions? All good.
I guess I have a bit of a question.
Yep.
Go, Ben. Go first, Alex. Okay.
No, you go, Ben. That's fine.
Okay. I had a student recently. I've only had one lesson with him so far, and he's been calling me very frequently. Like, this boy, it's 6 days since his lesson now. His next lesson's tomorrow, and I spoke to him twice and missed 2 calls. I'm just wondering. That's definitely not something I'm going to be able to keep going. So I'm wondering how I can gently tell him that I'm happy to respond to emails, but you can't be ringing me every day. I've got stuff to do.
Okay. I wouldn't be too concerned about that, in the sense that, and you know how I operate, and what you're trying to do, especially in the early stages, and this is maybe seems a bit of a contradiction, but you really want to make sure that when students ring you and ask you questions, even outside the lessons, that you follow up, that you really give them that.
Oh yeah, I feel like I should elaborate a little bit. It's not, I didn't understand this about the lesson. It's, I just played this. It was so much fun. I'm so glad that we're doing this. And I'm like, yeah, but I really can't spend 10 minutes every day just saying, yeah, it's really good. Because he literally has rung 4 times, and he's never had a question that's really needs answering. It's just to say, woo.
Okay, right. He wants to share
the excitement. Yeah.
Okay. I would encourage him to join your Facebook group, your student Facebook group, and to post his who's up on there. But still, look, I'm not. The way that I see it is that by bringing them together in groups, and as with the group lesson, the group model, is that it frees you up to be able to look after these kind of students, because this is the kind of student who may turn out to be a raving fan, and may turn out to really offer you some great insights. So I would run with it. And that's the kind of thing that I would do. It's just the way that I do things, and I believe it's the way to do it. Is that if any of you guys email me or contact me, and some of you regularly email me, regularly contact me, I'm not going to put you off in any way. And even if I go, oh well, this guy keeps interrupting me, blah blah blah, then I need to really rethink my position, because I'm actually excited, and I know that if there's something happening here, I need to work out a system. I need to have something. So this particular student wants to express his excitement, and he wants to express it to you. So you've got to work out a system that he can do that. How can he express his excitement with people who actually care? Because that's what he wants. He wants to talk to someone who actually cares, probably telling his neighbor or his friends or whoever, and they go, hey dude, go and tell someone who really cares, because we don't. and you seem to be the person who cares, because in the lesson you do care, and that's coming across. So what you want to do is really first of all be grateful for it and think, wow, this is great. This guy is really, he values me so much that he wants to ring me every day. That's fantastic. And I used to have, like, just to give you an example, I used to have a guy who would come in to my shop, and he was having guitar lessons. Anyway, he would come in and he would hang around and talk for, like, sometimes an hour, to tell him about his music and everything. Every day he would come in. And I thought, okay, how can I handle this? How can I turn this into a positive? Because I've got things to do. I'm not just hanging here all day, as he was thinking, so how can I turn it into a positive? What I did with him is I actually got him helping me with my business. I said, Brad, good to see you, mate. I've just got to get these guitars all tuned up. We've got to put them up on the shelves because we're selling guitars and stuff as well. Give me a hand, and then let's do it. So I took what appeared to be a negative and turned it into a positive. So that's the question I would be asking. How can you turn this guy into a positive? He's so keen to share. Why don't you say to him, hey, dude, come around 4 o'clock this afternoon. Tell me how you're going with your guitar, and you can help me get the studio ready. You can assist me with my guitar classes, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Come and do some flyers with me, and let's talk about how your guitar's going. Does that make sense?
Might be a little weird. He's only 11, and being a home studio and all, people might think, well, I don't know if I want to send my kid around on his own, having only had one lesson with you.
Yeah, well,
I definitely get your point, though. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, exactly what I'm saying. But he can be someone who can become a real asset to you because he's a fan. He's a fan of yours, Ben. And man, you've got to look after your fans. You've got to do the Michael Jackson thing, and I love you all. You've really got to show your appreciation for your fans, and get them on board. That's my thinking. Yeah. All right. He's someone who's probably going to bring you another 10 students at some point. That's what happens to your fans, is they're the ones who are out there talking about you and your school and how cool you are and how good your lessons are and how much they love them. So he's ringing you to say what? That I just practiced something and I did it, or what's he saying when he rings?
Well, the first 2 times when I answered, and the second 2 times when I was in lessons. So first he was just saying, I've been doing the picking. It's going well. Still know what I'm doing. Just got the guitar. It's so exciting. And the next time, he was saying, I'm just having a bit of trouble tuning it, but I've got it now. Surprising how quick those strings go out, isn't it? It's so much fun. Listen to how loud it is, and playing things down the phone. And he's just so over the top enthusiastic. I'm finding it really, because there's a slight language barrier as well, and he talks really quickly. He's got a very thick accent. And he's only 11, so he's really excited and really high-pitched, and it's very hard to make sense of what's going on. I guess it's just me being stressed out by the conversation, because I think I have to respond with as much enthusiasm as he has, but I can't assume what he said and give an answer, and then I got the wrong thing.
Yeah. And look, you don't necessarily have to respond to every call and every email, and these days you can just do it in your time. You can see it's him calling on your phone. I guess his number should show. And
what text back saying busy teaching, I'm afraid, but I'll listen to your message when I'm done.
Yeah, just remember, it's the big plan, the big vision. That's what you're going for. So this is a short term. You're looking at the short term. If his enthusiasm it keeps up, and I'm not talking, there are those cases, and I do have 1 or 2 that I remember of, where there was a kind of a disability there, if you like, that they weren't, it wasn't enthusiasm, it was actually, they had, some form of ADHD or something like that, where they were hyper excited all the time, and there was just a condition behind it. So in that case, you might have to talk to the parent or something to sort of say, look, could you tell your son not to ring every day or whatever? So there are cases like that. But if it's pure enthusiasm and it's exciting and that, you want to try and turn it into an asset in some way, shape, or form. And this student really is a gift. I would really seriously look at how this particular student. I would keep stoking the fire. I would get him more and more excited and go, okay, cool. I want you to practice more and more. That's great. Because this student, I had this another guy I can think of. He was the same, and that he would turn up to his lessons, early. But I taught him in the beginning, but then I put him onto another teacher because I was running the business, and he would come in. He'd always come in with his guitar strapped on. He was one of the very few students, probably the only student at that time I can remember who walked around with his guitar strapped on. Not in his case. So he would always come in early to talk to me, to try and to get a kind of a lesson out of me before he had his other lesson. And it got to the point where he was coming almost like an hour early. He'd come straight after school and his lesson would be at 4:30. But what I remember at the time thinking, oh God, he's taking up half my afternoon. I'm not getting things done. But I just couldn't. My natural thing was that I was really just wanted to give to him because he was so keen. I couldn't help not want to give more to him. So I kept giving him things and talking to him about. And he turned out at his school, which was a local school. I don't know how many students he brought to my school, but it was at least a dozen. It could have been anything up to 100 for all I know over the kind of the 3 years. But what happened was that he was a hero at school because he was getting so good on guitar because he was just practicing like he was like a Hendrix. He was just constantly practicing, and at school he was getting up playing, and all the kids thought he was the ants pants of guitar, and I was his hero. So it was kind of this, he's the school hero and I'm his hero, and it was just, that's what really, he brought in a lot of students because of that. Very valuable.
Sounds good.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Alex?
If I could ask, just with the long-term plan thing, one thing I've recently realized is, as you were saying before, when you're thinking long-term, you have to be thinking, is what I'm doing right now going to be effective 100 students, 200 students, 600 students later? And so it's become really obvious to me that I need to start writing down sort of protocols and things to actually deal with things on a regular basis, like really simple things like when to clean the shop, when to replace the toilet paper, when to I did a little sales one that's just on the wall, like when an inquiry comes in, write this down, put it in here, do that. So I was wondering if like you had an idea of some really important things that you just want to get down, just in terms of running your business, so almost so that you are looking at yourself as a guinea pig, almost as someone being hired, going like, okay, well, what do I have to do now? Oh, there's this list I can do. I can just follow everything like this, knowing that in the future you'll be able to get an employee to be able to do that. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Everything. Do you use Evernote? Have you got Evernote?
No, I don't actually. No good things.
Okay. My suggestion is, this is what I've done anyway, is set up Evernote, and then what you want to do is make a system for each thing that has to be done. And go through it in step by step, and that way what you do is that when you go through it yourself, you run through the system and know the system works. So it might be the daily cleanup organization for your studio, and they come in and step 1 is to unlock the door, step 2 is to I've
literally done that. Like that's exactly it. Like I've got like a list on the back of the door where it's like, go there. Oh, okay. This is what I have to do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You basically have the list, and they go through it step by step, and that way you could then make a video even explaining it, and then when you got a new employee come on, then you don't actually have to go through explain it to them. You just say, watch this video. And then you get them to run through it, and if it doesn't happen, then you go back and go, okay, what happened here? What was missed? And don't get into the kind of the blame game of you didn't watch the video properly or you didn't do this. If they didn't do it, then the system is still not working. There's something about the system that's not working. So it might be a thing where you have an actual checklist, a physical checklist on the computer where they have to tick each box off as they've completed the task. And you get them to do that each day, go through it, and then you keep, what you do is you keep developing those systems, and you want to be able to adjust it and improve it. And by doing it on Evernote, you can easily add in a step, or extend a step, whatever. But that's the idea, is that everything, if you go and spend some time at McDonald's, you'll see everything runs on systems, and that's what you want to. That's how you want to build your business. So every day should be about building a system. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that lately. Obviously, when I get to that next level, and I do have a few teachers and that sort of thing, is having, like at the moment, I teach with an iPad, and the way I prepare for lessons is I write down notes for each class, under each skill and that sort of thing. But having some sort of format associated with the iPad, and then once and having notes within the class for each student as well, saying for each teacher to take, how many minutes have they practiced this week and that sort of thing, and then if you have some sort of system where if they're under a certain amount of minutes after about 3 or 4 weeks, it gets flagged, and then that can go to me, and then I can call the parents as well as so and that way you have a profile for each class that any teacher can walk in on and know exactly what's going on as well,
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'd love to implement something like that in the future, for sure.
Well, that's great. And look, I think what we want to be doing is, or what we are doing, is creating systems that we can all use. So you guys aren't all building the wheel, that we together build one wheel and share it. And so when you see a system that you think your business needs, that you can see that could be used across the rest of the network, that's what we want to really share and work on. And we want to add it to our list of projects. And I've got in the knowledge base in Evernote, there's a section there called projects, and they're just things where I put things that I know that have come up, ideas, where we're going to develop systems. But the more that we do that, because we've got a network of us, then it's going to be a lot faster to develop these systems, because we're not all, you guys still to a large degree are developing the same systems. You've got and there's no point, there's no need to develop the same systems. What we want to do is work on one system together and then share it across the network. So for example, student practice, like Ben was just saying there, you're having something where you all of you had like an iPad or a computer set up as students walk in once a month, and this is all I did, is at the beginning of a new month, I would collect all the student practice totals, and I would ask them to total it up. And you could have a computer there where they go and total it up. They could even just take a picture of their practice log, hold it up to the camera, bang. Or with an iPhone, whatever, just take a picture, and then you can collate it. Sit down; it'll only take you, an hour. Add up enter all the totals of each of the students in, and then run it through a spreadsheet, which tells you, sorts it all, and then gives anyone who's under a certain amount, it flags off, like Ben said, and then they get sent a standard email saying, your practice was under the average. We need to talk, or whatever. We just have a system in place that acknowledges those who aren't meeting the criteria, and it puts your top 3 up there and then throws them in. So you print out your top 3 chart or whatever it is. So you know what I'm saying? This is just a system that we can create, and this is what we're going to be doing. And it's not that we need to have these things tomorrow. This is the long-term plan. This is about us creating more and more systems and making our business model, our teaching model, more and more efficient, so that in 5 years, G4, this is my vision anyway, this is my long-term vision, is G4 will be so far ahead of the pace that it'll be very, very difficult for other guitar schools to even come close, guitar teachers, because we'll have so many systems in place that when students come in to learn guitar, they'll learn it in a very systematic, organized way, where failure is almost impossible through the G4 system, and that's what we're trying to achieve. And there might be certain teachers out there who are really good one-on-one, teach a student a particular style, in a particular way, that's great. That'll always exist, and we're not trying to dominate the industry. We're just trying to take beginners to an intermediate level in as less time as possible with as less effort as possible. We're just trying to get it, so really narrowing down on what counts. Practice these things in this order for this long, and you will reach this particular goal. Cool. Yeah, so systems, let's work on those. And any systems you've got, anything you want to create, then throw them up and we can add them to the project list, and we'll just try and get to them as we can get to them. So, yeah. We're out of time. Thanks, guys, for dropping by. It was a good one today. I think we covered some good ground. And for those of you who want to make the night session, the Australian night session, it is 9 p.m. I'll be back at 9 p.m. tonight. So, all right. Thanks, guys. Have a good day. See you then, Ben. Okay.
See you later, guys.
Bye-bye.